Hi guys, welcome back to Movie Recap. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the films. From 2008, Bronson. Without any further, let's get started. The story opens with Charles Bronson narrating his own life as if it were a vaudeville stage act, cutting back and forth between moments from his childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. These scenes are presented as though he is performing in a theater before a live audience. At times, he directly addresses the camera, displaying erratic, bipolar-like behavior, sometimes talking animatedly, other times staring straight ahead in silence, almost without expression. He says he always believed he was destined for fame, convinced he was meant for something greater, though the audience offers no response. Running parallel to this performance are disturbing scenes of Bronson badly injured inside a cage, violently clashing with prison guards, highlighting his uncontrollable aggression. Despite the brutality, his theatrical persona suddenly bursts into laughter and holds up a credit card that reads, "This film is based on a true story." Bronson explains that there was nothing wrong with him as a baby or toddler, but as a child, he began stealing purely to upset his classmates and frequently got into fights he always won. In one extreme outburst, he even attacked a teacher, knocking him down and hurling a table at him in rage. His school conflicts constantly resulted in calls to his mother, but she consistently ignored them. He admits that, although he was violent from a young age, he did not consider himself truly evil, as he still lived by his own
I
code
still
of
have my
principles.
principle.
He took his first job at a diner, stealing whenever he had the chance, yet sharing the stolen money with a coworker for whom he had feelings. He reveals that he was born as Michael Peterson, but later reinvented himself under the name.
Charlie Bronson.
During his youth, authorities repeatedly tried to restrain him, but he always resisted, fighting police officers with his bare hands. In one altercation, he went so far as to bite off a policeman's ear. In England in 1974, Bronson moved into a rundown house with his former co-worker Irene after they had a baby together. He appeared to enjoy, or at least accept, his new family life. However, after a series of thefts and violent incidents involving a post office, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. His mother hoped the sentence would be reduced, possibly to 4 years. Bronson stands silently before his wife, whom he would never see again. Contrary to popular belief, his initial entry into prison deeply affected him, though he quickly mocks himself in his narration. He adopts the role of a clown dressed in an elegant suit, claiming he always imagined himself as a comedian. To him, the prison cell felt like a hotel room, an empty space where he endlessly paced in circles, isolated from the world every single day of the year. A violent episode erupts when he refuses to perform sewing work, leading to several guards brutally beating him. His aggressive attitude toward prison authority earns him notoriety among fellow inmates. More brutal clashes with guards follow, eventually landing him new duties, such as serving tea, a task he surprisingly excels at. While doing so, another inmate compliments his fists, marking the first time anyone has ever said something kind about them. The moment leaves Bronson completely stunned. Bronson openly refers to himself as Britain's most violent prisoner, describing prison as the ideal environment for someone like him. A montage of newspaper headlines presents him as uncontrollable and obsessed with fame. The only thing he truly despises is being constantly transferred from one prison to another. He recalls his time at Parkhurst, where he claims he lived like royalty. Despite frequent clashes with guards, he enjoys this lifestyle until he is eventually sent to a mental institution he mockingly calls the Funny Farm,
Seriously wrong, actually.
a place where patients smear themselves with feces and where it takes up to 4 men to restrain him. During his time there, Bronson convincingly plays the role of the mentally ill and is subjected to forced medication that leaves him heavily sedated most of the time. During recreation, one patient attempts to speak to him about his pedophilic urges, but Bronson, barely conscious, can only mumble incoherently and spit in denial. Several escape attempts follow, all while he is drugged to the point that he can barely walk. One such attempt occurs during a nighttime party where he stumbles helplessly until a staff member silently gestures for him to return with the others, something he is powerless to resist. Lost in his delusions of grandeur, Bronson comes up with a plan to murder another patient in order to be sent back to prison. Viewing the patients as lunatics, he targets the same pedophile who spoke to him earlier. The attempt fails, but it results in a sentence of 26 years in solitary confinement, which Bronson considers deeply unjust, as he insists he has never killed anyone. He presents this moment as part of his theatrical act, explaining that he was never given a trial for the punishment. On stage, Bronson reenacts a rooftop protest he once staged and boasts about costing the prison system tens of millions of pounds in damages, declaring himself Britain's most expensive prisoner. After these incidents, he is eventually deemed mentally sane and released, eager to rediscover life outside. Before leaving prison, he is handed his belongings: a wristwatch, a leather card holder, and a comb, the last item delivered as a joke due to his baldness. He reunites with his parents, who have moved into a new home, and show him where he will be staying. Bronson learns that many of his childhood possessions were left behind at their old house in Luton. He speaks fondly of his Uncle Jack, a man who knows everyone, believing he can help retrieve his belongings. Bronson travels to Luton and meets his flamboyant uncle, who runs a brothel and welcomes him as a novelty attraction. The women flock around Bronson, indulging him with attention and drinks. Among the faces there, Bronson encounters a familiar figure, a former inmate who once complimented his fists while Bronson served tea in prison. This man proposes starting an underground fighting business and tells Bronson he needs a proper stage name. After rejecting the name Charlton Heston, they settle on Charles Bronson, inspired by the American actor, a name he adopts permanently. At the brothel, Bronson watches an exotic pole dancer and unexpectedly breaks down in tears, overwhelmed by seeing a naked woman for the first time in years. The following morning, he speaks with Allison, a woman who works for his uncle. She compliments his scars and physique and kisses him passionately. Bronson accepts her affection, and she becomes his lover. His new profession involves bare-knuckle fighting in farms and cramped rooms. He wins effortlessly, sometimes humiliating opponents by taunting them or urinating on them. Though the pay is modest at first, Bronson continues, eventually taking on multiple opponents at once and defeating them for the crowd's amusement. At one point, he even engages in a bare-knuckle fight against a dog, beating it. One day, Bronson confesses his love to Allison while she is quietly reading. She responds by admitting that she loves someone else, her boyfriend Brian, a man who owns a motorcycle. At Christmas, Bronson violently robs a jewelry store, stealing a ring intended for Allison. During the robbery, he knocks a male employee unconscious and warns a terrified saleswoman not to call the police for 15 minutes. Later, when he presents the ring to Allison, she tells him she does not love him because he lacks ambition. She then reveals that she plans to marry Brian. Bronson is devastated but manages to congratulate her. He later tells the audience that the saleswoman did, in fact, wait exactly 15 minutes before calling the police, which leads to his arrest after only 69 days of freedom. When asked what he did during those 69 days, Bronson sarcastically replies that he was building an empire, an answer that only confuses and amuses the prison governor. Back in his cell, a librarian guard named Andy Love brings him reading material. Bronson locks the door, takes Andy hostage, and begins screaming and swearing to provoke the guards. Knowing they will rush in to rescue the guard, Bronson orders Andy to help him coat his naked body in petroleum jelly so he will be harder to restrain. Despite his preparations, Bronson is overwhelmed by the guards, severely beaten, muzzled, and transferred to another cell. The prison governor warns him that if he continues down this nihilistic path, he will die inside prison. Later, Bronson receives praise from Mr. Daniels, his Spanish-accented art teacher who works in the prison art room. For the first time, Bronson discovers genuine enjoyment in drawing, particularly birds. His teacher tells him to find the missing piece, something that does not belong. An animated sequence illustrates Bronson's disturbed inner thoughts, followed by a conversation with the prison governor, who encourages him to pursue art. Bronson reacts with skepticism and hostility, but at Mr. Daniels' insistence, he reluctantly gives the governor a sample of his artwork. Although Mr. Daniels continues to support him, A misunderstanding leads Bronson to believe his teacher is trying to exploit his talent. Acting on this paranoia, Bronson attacks Mr. Daniels from behind. On stage, the audience cheers him, but Bronson abruptly exits after only a few seconds. Back in the art room, Bronson paints his body black and threatens to kill Mr. Daniels. When the prison governor asks what he wants from outside the locked room, Bronson simply demands music. He keeps his teacher tied up and covered with a blanket while classical music plays. Inside, Bronson crafts objects and paints Mr. Daniels' face, treating the situation as an artistic performance. When he decides the work is complete, he calls the guards and invites them in, fully prepared for another violent confrontation. After a struggle, the guards finally overpower him and force him to the ground. The film fades to black. On-screen text reveals that the real Charles Bronson has spent 34 years in prison, 30 of them in solitary confinement, with no confirmed release date. The final image shows a bloodied Bronson confined inside a cramped cage so small he cannot even sit upright, groaning in pain. 2 guards shut the doors, sealing off his last access to fresh air and leaving him completely alone. Thanks for watching, and remember to turn on your notifications to watch more movie recaps like this one.